Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth of Motor City Madmouth, and I am glad to have on the broadcast tonight Bethany Bradsher, and she's the author of her own book, The Big Rock. And you know what, Bethany, I'm very delighted to have you on the broadcast tonight.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the chance to come on and talk about this book and this amazing event.
Well, as much as I like to cover a lot of major sports, I enjoy sports like fishing and a lot of the other ones because I don't think that they get enough recognition that they deserve. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to utilize this platform to talk about, to build a new audience with our fishing listeners out there. And you know what? When the opportunity came on for you and I to work this out, it was an absolute slam dunk, no-brainer. And yes, I'm using other sports to describe fishing. I guess the one thing I don't think I could ever do is be a fisherman because I'm too loud and I'd scare them all away anyway. So what can I tell you?
That's okay. You have other talents.
Well, why, thank you. At least I'm not scaring this fish away, and that's you. So with that said, got to transition and segue over it. So let's talk about the race that we're talking about today. Why don't you explain to our listeners what this race is all about?
So the Big Rock Blue Marlin Tournament is the event that the book is focused on, and it's actually going on right now, which is one of the reasons it's great to talk about because, you know, there aren't that many sporting events that have restarted. But this is a huge tournament, and it happens in Moorhead City, North Carolina, on the northern coast of North Carolina. But it's one of the biggest Blue Marlin tournaments on the East Coast, especially in terms of the money that's at stake, the number of boats, and the fish are massive. The winning fish most years is between 500 and 900 pounds.
My goodness. So let's talk about some cash. A lot of us don't have it. A lot of us would like to get it. But then you tell me about the amount of dollars in total prize money is $3.3 million for this tournament. Please elaborate.
Yes, so $3.34 million is at stake. The winning marlin, so the number one biggest fish that's caught, so for one fish, that boat will win $1.1 million this year. So you're out fishing for a $1 million fish. And another big prize is the first marlin boated over 500 pounds, so that one is kind of a time element, wins $555,000. So actually, they've had 2 days of fishing this year, and that prize is still up for grabs. Nobody has caught a fish over 500 yet. So that causes a lot of excitement when fish come in to be weighed.
Well, I'll tell you, my father-in-law, when I was going after a 215 license to try to get insurance, would say, you know, you need to put duct tape on your mouth and then focus on what you're doing. I guess at $1.1 million, I can tell you what, I have no problem investing into duct tape if it means trying to catch one for that amount of money, that's for sure. So, yeah, duct tape, if I ever go fishing, might be the prerequisite. So that's a lot of money, that's for sure. So let's talk about something interesting about the 2010 winning boat was disqualified due to the fact that there was no valid North Carolina fishing license. Please, I got to hear more about that one.
Oh, my goodness. Scott, this was a huge story up here in North Carolina. So this boat had the award, you know, the prize-winning fish, about $1 million fish, and they brought it in, they weighed it. On the way, well, as they were coming in, they realized that a 22-year-old kid who was part of their crew, he's a college kid, had not obtained a $30 North Carolina fishing license. And so he tried to renew it on the way in on his phone, and that was all that eventually came out. They give a polygraph test to someone in the crew, and so the story of the fishing license being bought after the fish was caught, that was enough to disqualify that boat and cost them that money and that award. There were lawsuits that ensued for the next few years. Eventually, the Big Rock tournament settled with the boat, which was called Citation, and Citation did get a share of their winnings through the court case, but it was a big mess and, you know, a huge story because it's a lot of money to lose over one fishing license.
Yeah, the Big Rock tournament, I'll tell you what, that's unbelievable, and I'm amazed at the whole thing. But I as much as I like to kid around, we're talking 22-year-olds that want to do everything with their mobile phones. I don't know about you, but if I knew I was racing in something like this, I'd put the check in the mail or I'd drop it off, but do what you got to do to get the money over there, not depend on these cell phones.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because I went out on a boat fishing in the tournament 2 years ago, and I wasn't really fishing. I was really just observing. And the captain of that boat, you know, asked me more than once, do you have your fishing license? You know, I had to go buy one too because the rules stipulate that everyone on board has to have one. And he was very careful to check with me. So I guess after that incident, nobody was going to leave anything to chance about that rule.
So tell me more about the Big Rock tournament. I think a lot of our listeners would like to hear more about it.
Well, I think what makes it unique in part is the way this community, Moorhead City, North Carolina, really rallies around it. It's a small coastal town, and when the boats run offshore, it takes about 2 to 3 hours for them to go out to the fishing grounds. And so when they catch a big blue marlin and they think it's big enough for a weigh-in, which is typically over 400 pounds, they will radio back to shore and say, we've boated a blue, and it may be a 2-hour wait for them to come back to the weigh station. So crowds just gather. And it's a little different this year because they're trying to maintain some social distancing, but you'll get thousands and thousands of people usually just crammed in there waiting for this boat to back in. And they're huge boats, expensive crafts like you've never seen. And then they weigh the marlin there at the dock, and everybody understands the kind of money that's at stake. So it's just so much fun to be part of that, and the way this whole community up and down this coast, if they hear there's a boat heading to the dock, I think some of them, I'd like to know how work productivity plummets that week because they hear it on the audio feed and they hop in their car and head to the dock because they don't want to miss the excitement.
One of the things we talked about earlier today is that when a fish comes in and you're talking about a prize-winning fish, one of the crew members does go for an immediate polygraph test. And obviously you have the rules and the fishermen. Don't you think that they take this a lot more seriously now than they ever did before all that took place?
I do, and I think the more money is at stake every year, the pot keeps growing, and they have to kind of increase the number of rules. I compare that to parenting. I think in parenting we have to add rules because our kids try to stretch the rules or try things that maybe they shouldn't be doing, and so suddenly a new policy is in place, and that's been true with the Big Rock. It was a lot simpler in the early days. The boats were smaller, the money was less, but they were still catching marlin out there, and I think the fact that Michael Jordan, I just gave that away, is out there
that's all right. We're going to be talking about him
this year.
anyways.
That tells you a lot about the way this tournament is viewed and the reputation it has as really a premier sport fishing event.
That's all right. We're going to get to it sooner or later, so it doesn't matter. But we'll throw a little teaser out there so that people will listen to the whole broadcast and say, well, what about Michael Jordan? Well, stick around a few minutes. We'll go ahead and talk about MJ. I got to ask you, though, did you ever watch that documentary of him, The Last Dance?
I sure did. Every one of the 10 parts, I loved it.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you're a Pistons fan, whether you would care for it much. And I'm from the Detroit area, so...
well, I'm a North Carolina graduate.
No, I could have... So. Hey, listen, let me tell you what.
So Tar Heels stick together.
Well, here, I'll give you something here. I was at the 1982 Final Four in New Orleans when the Tar Heels beat Dean Smith.
Oh, I'm really jealous.
You are? Well, I'll tell you what. As I look at... a piece of memorabilia that I have here. I have a T-shirt from that March 27th to 29th, 1982 at the Louisiana Superdome, and I was there.
That's amazing.
Now bear with me. I had nosebleed section all the way up there because I ended up buying it with a friend of mine, and the Superdome was big. But I'm going to tell you another little story that we can talk about. It is the guy that ended up calling the game, Gary Bender, and I ended up meeting in Phoenix when he was the Phoenix Suns announcer, and he gave me his book, and we stayed in touch for a while after that, and Gary Bender called the game, and I ended up writing a story on him for the Detroit Monitor.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's just amazing.
And I got to tell you, I met some of those North Carolina girls over at the New Orleans YMCA, and they were very, very nice young ladies, let me tell you.
Yes, we are. We're all good ones.
Oh, yeah, no, it was pretty good stuff. We had some pretty good karma over there, that's for sure. So, since you're a North Carolina girl, I breathe you. North Carolina Tar Heels, it's all good. I mean, one of the best programs on the planet. Dean Smith, it was fun for me to go ahead and watch Dean Smith win his first title against Patrick Ewing, by the way.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
Yeah. What a small world, huh, Bethany? My goodness. But with that said, okay, let's talk about the reach of the tournament. You say it's followed all over the world by live video and audio stream. Explain,
it is.
Please.
That's. I think that's very unique. They have video stream of everything that happens at the weigh station. So anytime a fish, a marlin is weighed, or at the end of the day, they do have categories for some of the game fish, dolphin, tuna, and wahoo. So you can see those weigh-ins. They're not quite as huge. But there's also a live audio stream that's constant throughout the day where this guy, Randy Ramsey, he's the voice of the Big Rock, and he sits up in the office at a radio table and he talks to the fleet all day offshore. So if somebody hooks a fish, they have to report it to him. This is all the way the rules work. So he reports who hooks a fish, and then whether they release the fish, which they can get points for the releases, or if they boat the fish, or if they lose it. All that comes through on the radio. So people will keep it on all day. And there was one day of the broadcast during the time that I was covering this tournament in depth that they said that 17,000 people had listened from 56 different countries.
Wow.
So it has a broad appeal, and they sell T-shirts like crazy. It's just become kind of a brand, almost kind of an outdoors brand here in this part of the coast, and people just love it. It's a cherished event. I know people are very grateful it happened this year because there was some doubt as to whether they'd be able to go on with the tournament.
56 nations tuning in for real.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't want to sound like it's just any fishing tournament. We're talking about a lot of money, and you're talking about, big fish, big blue marlin. But to me, it's just unbelievable and fascinating as I think about the whole thing. So we teased on this a little earlier about Michael Jordan is fishing this year. So let's go ahead on to our point. You talk about Jordan's boat being called the Catch 23.
Yes, the Catch 23. It's an 80-foot craft. It's beautiful, and the second largest boat in the tournament this year, I believe. I did see a 90-foot, but those are most of the boats are more in the 50-foot range. That's more common. So yeah, there were some rumors last week that he was entered, and it wasn't confirmed until over the weekend. But apparently, he entered the White Marlin Classic, which is a big marlin tournament up in Maryland last summer. So he's getting into fishing. I've heard he's fished in some sailfish tournaments in Florida. So he's out there with his crew. And, the big news is if someone has caught a marlin large enough to bring it to the dock, and that doesn't happen, in a typical year, it probably only happens 10 or 12 times all week. It's not that common for someone to catch a fish that big. So with 200 boats entered, the odds aren't great that MJ would pull that off. And yet today he did. And it was so exciting. So we got word that he had boated a blue marlin, and everybody scrambled, to the landing. It was not a large enough fish to get him on the leaderboard. I think he's sixth right now. It was a 442-pound marlin, which is large when you see it. But considering the fact that last year's winner was over 900 pounds, there's bigger fish out there. But he did get to come, and people saw him, and it was a very big moment and a great moment for the Big Rock. It just legitimizes the way people view this event. And last year and the year before, Terry Labonte has fished in it from NASCAR. So, there are others from the sports world who know that this is just a great event to be part of.
Well, when a guy owns a Charlotte Hornets, I think you could probably afford an 80-foot boat, don't you think?
I think so. And he didn't really need the money today, so it was just nice to enjoy him bringing a fish in and to see how excited everybody was down at the waterfront.
Well, all I know is social media ate it up alive, and you and I were fortunate to capitalize on it, knowing how lucky can me and you be, that I'm catching this on social media. And by the way, Bethany Bradsher is coming on the broadcast tonight. Really? Give me fuel to promote this broadcast, and I'll make John King look pretty dull. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking fish. We're talking Terry Labonte. We're talking about NASCAR. We have a recurring theme. And more importantly, I think it's, to me, does this tournament put fishing on the map?
I think that this business with, Michael Jordan is not going to hurt. I think if people knew just the way the drama unfolds throughout the week, they would want to follow it more. And I'm not a fisherman. I mean, I didn't grow up fishing all that much. I certainly didn't follow competitive fishing. I don't watch the Saturday morning fishing shows all that, rapidly. My husband does. He loves those. But I think that if people knew that you kind of follow it throughout the week and there's so much on the line, and it can come down to a number of ounces between fish, and then you're talking about $1 million. It's just exciting. If you like sports and you like drama, it really is a fantastic event. And social media and the live feeds have allowed people to follow it, like we said, from all over the place. So it's fun to be there, but you don't have to be there to get caught up in it. So I really hope it's going to take off even more, because the people down there put on a great tournament, and it's worthy of that.
Do you remember Ted Turner, the former owner of the Atlanta Braves, when he was involved?
Oh, sure.
What was it he was involved in? I remember, was it America's Cup, I think?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it was America's Cup.
Well, anytime you have a high-profile owner involved in something like this, it's really good how you can use their popularity to promote that particular sport, in addition to the fact that he's a very credible individual, a high-profile owner, and with the America's Cup. Do you find that sometimes when a person like Jordan's involved, that there's a relative comparison there?
Yeah, I do. I think, and he's from North Carolina. He's from the East. He has ties here, so people feel like they can kind of claim him. And obviously, it's, with the Hornets. I almost said Bobcats. I just had a quick flashback. It's the Hornets again. But I think for him to come out here, a little Moorhead City, and be part of this, it just means the world. It really does. And it's something that I think it's a little bit of an undiscovered gem, and I'm glad that the world is getting a little peek. I mean, I have a friend in Atlanta, a college roommate, who said her sons have followed it all day today, everything that's happened, and they've never followed it before. And that's because they're Carolina basketball fans. So
tell me, how many people make the mistake when they talk about the Charlotte Bobcats to the Hornets, even though Jordan was smart enough to get the name Hornets back from the New Orleans Hornets? I didn't think the New Orleans Hornets belonged in New Orleans, and I still don't think the Utah Jazz should have the Jazz. So somehow, some way, there's a little bit of a name. In fact, I'll even take it further. I don't think the Los Angeles Lakers need to be the Lakers, since they were once upon a time with Minneapolis Lakers.
In Minneapolis, which is the place where the lakes are. That's right. No, there's something a little wrong with all that. And I lived near Charlotte during the original manifestation of the Hornets in the early 90s, and I used to get to go watch them when they never had an empty seat. They sold out every game, and, Larry Johnson and Muggsy Bogues and Del Curry. It was a blast. That was an amazing, there's such great history there. So they haven't quite been able to recapture it, but I do think they have a better chance called the Hornets than the Bobcats. Well,
those are some pretty good teams back there. You mentioned a lot of good names for sure. And I think that was too bad that George Shinn moved the team to New Orleans, but I'm glad that the NBA brought the Hornets, the Charlotte basketball team, and eventually became the Hornets. So here we are talking fishing and a little bit of Charlotte.
Fishing and basketball.
Yeah, why not? Hey, you're in North Carolina. We can get away with it. But
sure. We talk about basketball through every lens possible around here.
Well, let me tell you, whether you know it or not, I actually lived in North Carolina on 2 occasions. I was actually the public relations director in 1987 for the Gastonia Rangers, and that's the team that had Sammy Sosa, Juan Gonzalez, Dean Palmer, and we lost 90-some games, and there were only 12 major leaguers that came from that, so go figure. And then my second reincarnation in North Carolina, I lived in the Charlotte area. It's safe to say I enjoyed living in Charlotte more than the Gastonia, Bessemer City area for another day.
Yes.
But I certainly know one thing. I didn't have cable TV, and I couldn't afford it, but I didn't need it with all the ACC basketball on every channel on the planet, that's for sure.
That is for sure.
So I know that area well. So let's talk about this week. You say the tournament's going on through Saturday, so why don't you give everybody an idea what they can expect for during for the rest of the week before we get into your book?
Sure, absolutely. Well, one of the things that is exciting at this point, well, there's several things, but the first 2 days, the fishing has been quite lively out there. I mean, there have been a lot of fish caught, and white marlin and blue marlin released, and like I said, about 4 weigh-ins each day, Monday and Tuesday. So that's a good sign for the rest of the week. What everyone's watching now is for that first fish to be brought in over 500 pounds, because that's going to be a winner of $555,000. So that's huge. And then you have to wait until Saturday afternoon to know who the big winners are, first, second, and third place, because it's pretty common for this leaderboard to be shaken up on the final day. That happens a lot. And so the fishing goes through Saturday. Each boat fishes 4 out of the 6 eligible days. So there's 6 fishing days, but every boat fishes 4 and lays out 2. So that's a strategic decision on the part of the captains. It has to do with weather and conditions, and as long as this $500,000 is still on the table, most of the boats who are entered in that category are going to keep fishing because they don't want to not be out there and miss the chance for that money. So there's all kinds of chess that kind of gets played, and I just find the whole thing very interesting to watch. So it's going to be fun. And, Catch 23 with MJ might bring another fish in. It's possible. So everyone should keep an eye on that as well.
Well, I'll tell you, years ago, I actually did some deep sea fishing out in Acapulco, caught a couple amberjack, and then I went ahead and caught a couple fish out in Alaska, some halibut. So, I enjoyed deep sea fishing. I think that if I ever go to a place like that again, I'd like to go there. I don't think you'll need any duct tape to keep me quiet for them because they don't pay much attention.
Amberjack's good eating, so you got to be quiet enough to get that and cook it.
Well, I wasn't smart enough to realize I should have taken the meat. I tried to stuff it, then they got destroyed in my attic later. But I still have the halibut got destroyed. I had the amberjack, but they were good. Right. So let me ask you. You bring up an interesting point, though, and that's this: when they catch these fish, do they go ahead and take the meat out so that they can feed people with it, or what do they do with these bad boys?
They use the marlin for research purposes. The NC State Marine Science Department has a whole slew of research projects that they do with the marlin every year. It's funny, I said to somebody today, you don't eat marlin. And they said they'd seen marlin on the menu at a restaurant. But around here, you don't eat marlin. I have never heard of someone eating marlin. So some listener of yours is going to tell me I'm wrong and send me a recipe, and that will be interesting because there's a lot of meat on this fish, but it just is not typically a fish that gets eaten. Now, that's not always true for some of the other fish caught in the tournament, like the tuna, which obviously is delicious. So some of those do get eaten by the boats that catch them after they're weighed in. But there's quite a bit, like I said, of research and scientific advancement that comes from the marlin that are caught.
Well, the only thing that every time they eat the marlins is if the Miami Marlins are playing a team that's much better than they eat marlins. And if you're looking to eat dolphins, and you got the Miami Dolphins down here, and I live in an area that's heavily involved with fish. So, yeah, it's that old Florida thing where you got the Dolphins and the Marlins. Don't know, and we know where the Heat fit in, and we know about the Panthers. So, a little bit of history with the old fishing business down here. With that said, okay, let's transition over to your book called The Big Rock. You said the foreword was by Curtis Strange. Why did you have Curtis Strange go ahead and write that foreword?
Well, I knew it would be helpful to have a two-time U.S. Open champion's name on the front of my book, as you would know. But Curtis Strange is on the Big Rock Board of Directors. He lives in Moorhead City. He has a place in Florida, too, but he spends much of the year up here in Moorhead City, and he loves the Big Rock. He has fished in it before on his boat. He has missed it in recent years because of U.S. Open broadcasting responsibilities. So he would get to go to the opening captain's party and have to leave. But this year, with the U.S. Open not happening as scheduled, he is around. And I mentioned the video feed. He's actually one of the MCs for some of the time down there at the dock. So if you tune in, you might see Curtis Strange broadcasting fishing, which is fun. But he's also very involved with the charitable efforts of the tournament. They give a ton of money every year to nonprofits and service organizations around that area. So he's, part of his role on the board is really helping with that as well. So it was great. He really believes in the tournament, and he was glad to do it. And I saw him the other day down there, and he was excited about the book. So I was very grateful. Well,
please tell him the Motor City Madmouth would like to talk to him one day. That's for sure.
I will let him know for sure.
Yeah, he probably doesn't know who the Motor City Madmouth anyways, but at some point on the road with a little bit of help from the man upstairs, a little bit of fate. Look forward to Curtis talking to a strange broadcaster. If there's a pun intended, no caffeine here tonight did that damage earlier. So now that we're talking about the Big Rock book, why don't you tell us what it's all about?
Sure. So I had the idea a couple of years ago that I really wanted to feature this marlin tournament because of what I've mentioned, just how much drama and intrigue is included in it, how many great stories I think are embedded in this tournament. So I had a friend who was entered in the tournament, and he agreed to take me out on the boat so I could experience what it was like out there fishing. And through that, I decided to just stay down here and really focus on one year's tournament. And that year was 2018. So I stayed down here and I covered every day of the action, all the, leaderboard shakeups and all the boats that had big days and the ones that got away and the dramatic fighting a fish for multiple hours and pulling up to the dock. And there were so many stories. What happened was I really got to know the captains and the boat owners and the anglers from some of these particular boats, and was able to tell it in a way that, the story unfolded pretty dramatically. I was grateful because it's true. So you have to hope that the action follows a path that people are going to be excited by. And it just couldn't have gone better, the way that week unfolded. So I was able to use that 2018 tournament as a vehicle to tell about the Big Rock as a whole. So kind of dove down deep and told the story, like the 2010 disqualification and other big events and big storylines from the history of the tournament, while still, sticking with my main storyline from 2018. And then a cool thing that happened is last year on the last day, a boat from Maryland brought in this 914-pound marlin that broke the tournament record. And I was here for that, and so that became the book's epilogue. So I was able to really end on an incredibly high note, because that's a wild story. I just, someone's got to get the book to read the whole thing, but it is a crazy story of how they caught and got that fish in. They couldn't get the fish all the way through the door and had to figure out a way to get it to the dock, even as it was sticking out. So it was wild.
I think it's so cool that you went fishing and monitored the operation, and then you were embedded just to tell a story. That to me is unreal, to be able to do everything along the way. I can imagine. I don't know if you had a tape recorder, whether you had a reporter's notebook. How did you document everything to be able to put it in book format?
I interviewed people every chance I could. So if I knew that a certain boat had a big day, I would go find them at their boat. I tried to go right away. So I'd go to the marina where they dock and try to get a few minutes, because I wanted it to be fresh, the memories of what had happened out there. Having said that, I did some interviews after. I kept following up with people afterwards. But a lot of it was being in the office and hearing that radio chatter all day and getting to kind of get a feel for the action, and then going down to the dock for all the weigh-ins, and also getting to go out on the boat. So I knew what that was like too. I understand what the big tackle looks like, and how they call it setting the spread, put that tackle out to attract marlin, and what happens when a fish is hooked. And, it was just the whole education. I had one of the veteran Big Rock captains read my manuscript, because I wanted to make sure I got the terminology right, and that the veterans wouldn't, think that I was talking down or saying things incorrectly. So that's half the challenge. But I also wanted to write a book that people who know nothing about marlin fishing would pick up and be interested in, and would get it. It wouldn't be so inside that they would, get lost.
I have a niece, actually, that'll be attending Florida Atlantic University, who's actually going to be studying marine biology. So if you had to give her any advice about studying marine biology, would there be any kind of advice that you can tell her, knowing that she's dealing with the ocean, the wide open seas? And I can't imagine nobody would want to go shark fishing. I think it would be a pretty tough experience, depending on the animal you're dealing with. I know great whites might be hard, but makos are a tough fish to catch, too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have, in living in eastern North Carolina, have just been fascinated by the wide variety of fisheries, the numbers of types of fish, and the way they run in certain seasons. And so people go fish for, shad at one point, or striper at another, and then on the offshore, it's completely different ecosystems. And so it's just interesting. I like to hear. We were actually down there today. My daughter and I got to see MJ's fish and got to take a picture with it. And one of the weighmasters is a guy that works for the Marine Fisheries Department here, and he's just an expert on everything. And he was explaining to my daughter about the physiology of a marlin and how the gills work, and that a marlin is both warm and cold-blooded. It was right. So interesting, because he knew everything about it. Yeah,
we wouldn't be encouraging shark fishing on a nice broadcast where we're talking about marlin. That might be something that Jacques Cousteau would have to talk about, not Bethany Bradsher. So but what would you give my niece about her studies with marine biology? Do you have anything that you'd probably want to add to it since you're around the waters?
I would just tell her to come to the Big Rock one year, because they're doing a lot of research projects and they need people to help out. So she would probably learn a lot from seeing these fish at the dock.
Well, I'll make sure she's listening to this broadcast, and you and I will work out particulars if she ever wants to go ahead and do that.
Absolutely.
There's nothing like the old on-the-job training and experience firsthand. So why don't you let our listeners know, Bethany, where they can find the book?
Sure, absolutely. So you can go to bigrockbook.com, and that website has all the information you need. There's a lot of opportunities to order the book online. We have free shipping right now, so that's as good as Amazon. It is on Amazon as well, and the ebook is there if anyone's an ebook reader. But we've been having some trouble. We sent them some books, but they don't have the actual book up right this minute. So that's why I've been telling people, just get it on bigrockbook.com. That's simple, and it's going to be fast and free shipping. Beyond that, we're working on getting it in some retail stores. We have it in some retail stores up here in North Carolina, but trying to get it a little bit broader too. So as we add stores, that brick and mortar stores, they'll be added there on the website. The other thing I wanted to mention is I've been writing daily updates from this year's tournament. So there'll be one tomorrow about the experience of MJ coming to the docks. And so if anyone wants more detail about what's happening in 2020 at the Big Rock, just check out my website, bigrockbook.com, and you can read all about it.
Is there any other way that our listeners can get a hold of you, Bethany?
Twitter is a great way to reach me. So my Twitter handle is Bethany Bradsher, which is BethanyBradsher. And that's where you find me on Twitter, and that would be great. I'd love a follow, and if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to me that way, or if they want to ask anything more about the book.
Very good. Folks, you're listening to Sports Exchange here on the WSAN Network, which stands for World Sports and News Network. We're proud to have Bethany Bradsher on the broadcast tonight. And Bethany, I'll tell you, when you bring something this unique to the table, it's certainly something that I hope that people take advantage of. And if you send us any information here to the Tribune, we'll be more than happy to get that out there as well. So just so everybody knows, okay, the way to follow us is you can follow us at Tribune South, which Bethany has done. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And, of course, she follows us on the South Florida Tribune as well, our page there. On Instagram, we can be reached at South Florida Tribune. I have a YouTube channel. I can't wait to meet you one day so we can do a YouTube video together. That's something I look forward to getting up there. We'll have to work on that down the road, okay?
Oh, for sure.
And, of course, our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and LinkedIn. My name is Scott Morganroth. You can also listen to the broadcast on southfloridatribune.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, you're listening to WSAN Network. So any closing thoughts here, Bethany? I know we've covered a lot of ground.
I would just say I think that if people follow the tournament and follow the action, they will not regret it. I think it's something that your listeners will really enjoy and go back to year after year when June rolls around, because it's just really special. So thanks for giving me the chance to talk about it.
Oh, Bethany, anytime I get an opportunity to do an enlightening broadcast, that's what it's all about. And I want people to realize here on the Sports Exchange that we like to be able to provide the opportunity to cover every single sport. And I think fishing is a very good sport. And I got to tell you one other fishing story really quickly while we have another 15 seconds. Many years ago when I was fishing, I had an uncle who lost his wallet in the ocean, in the lake, because we have those in Michigan. And I said, is that your wallet? And he practically jumped out of the boat and grabbed it, and I saved him a lot of trouble with the credit cards and the licenses. So,
oh, that was good. See, way to go. You do have some fishing success.
Oh, well, I found my wife. She was one good fish as well. So with that said, folks, thanks for joining us here on the Sports Exchange tonight. And Bethany, once again, it was a pleasure having you on the broadcast. So please go out there and check out her book. Good night, everybody.